The North Atlantic was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from calm seas or a sleeping crew. This was deeper, thicker, as if the very ocean was holding its breath. Aboard the Artemis, a mid-sized oceanographic research vessel, silence wasn't uncommon. But tonight, even the hum of the generators felt off. The crew, usually noisy with laughter or arguments, had fallen into an unnatural stillness. It was the fog, or maybe it was what lay beyond it. They first saw the shape 2 hours before dusk, a ship, floating with no lights, no signal, no sound. Drifted in like a ghost, Captain Marlowe muttered, binoculars glued to his weathered face. Standing beside him on the upper deck, Dr. Elise Radner, marine biologist and expedition lead, squinted at the dark silhouette. No response on all channels. Nothing on AIS either. It's not broadcasting anything. Could be a derelict. The captain shook his head. Too intact for that. She's barely listing. Look at the way she sits on the water. Elise said nothing, but a chill slid down her spine. The ship seemed wrong. Not damaged. Not wrecked. Just abandoned in a way that made her stomach tighten. Get the team ready, Marlowe said finally. We're going aboard. They docked alongside just after sundown. The mysterious vessel bore no name, no markings at all. Just a faded grey hull that drank in the light of their spot lamps and gave nothing back. It loomed beside them like a tombstone. A boarding party was assembled. Elise, first mate Caleb, engineer Tomas, and crewman Saito. Elise adjusted her headset and stepped onto the gangplank last, her boots thudding against metal that felt too cold for the mild Atlantic air. The deck was silent. Not a creak, not a groan, no gulls, no wind. Tomas whistled low. This place is dead. Caleb shot him a look. Don't start. They moved in formation, checking the upper deck, then the bridge. Equipment was powered down. Systems intact. No sign of damage or distress. But more disturbingly, no sign of the crew. No bodies. No blood. No struggle. Just nothing. Below deck, it was worse. Cabins were still made. Personal effects left behind. Glasses half full of water. Bunk beds unmade. A still warm coffee mug in the control room. It was as if everyone had simply stood up and left, mid-action. Elise picked up a crew log, pages yellowed with salt and age. The last entry was dated 5 days ago. Day 32. Still no response from the bridge. Food going missing. Heard the whispering again last night. Thompson swears it's coming from the engine room. I told him to sleep topside. No more lights flickering so far, but we're watching. Something isn't right with the ship. She's changing. Elise frowned. Changing. Tomas, peering into a storage room, muttered, I don't like this. Caleb exhaled sharply. We check engineering. Then we're off this thing. They descended into the engine room. And that's when the smell hit them. Not rot. Not oil. Something wetter. Like salt and iron, with a thick, organic undertone. Like the sea had spilled its guts and left them to cook in the dark. Saito gagged. Jesus. Elise moved toward a darkened panel. Her flashlight flickered, once, then twice. She tapped it, but it didn't come back on. The lights overhead began to hum. Then they saw it. A handprint, pressed into the glass of the emergency hatch, but not on the glass. Inside it, like something had touched the inner layer, leaving behind a dark, reddish smear that glowed faintly under their lights. Caleb approached. That can't be inside the panel. But it was. Saito reached for the intercom. Captain, we found something in the... Then static, and the sound of metal groaning. Above them, they raced back topside, but the fog had thickened. So thick, the Artemis was no longer visible. Where the hell? Caleb turned in a full circle. We just tied off an hour ago. They reached the side where the docking ladder had been. Gone. The ropes, cut, frayed at the ends. Saito leaned over the railing. There's nothing out there, just water. Elise's voice dropped. No, no, I can see the Artemis's light. Look. A dim glow flickered about 50 feet out, but it was sinking into the fog. Shrinking, Tomas shouted into his headset. Artemis, come in. We're stranded. Do you copy? No reply. The fog swallowed the last flicker of light. Then, silence. They were alone. Completely. Elise looked back toward the bridge. We need to activate the emergency beacon on this ship. Let someone know we're stuck here. Caleb nodded, jaw tight. I'll head to the communications room. Saito, come with me. Tomas and Elise remained on deck, scanning the water. She whispered, more to herself than anyone, why would anyone leave like this? Tomas didn't answer. He was staring at something in the fog. Elise. She followed his gaze. Far out on the port side, just past the mist, something floated. A shape. Humanoid. Face down. Tomas moved to the rail. Is that? Elise grabbed his shoulder. Don't. We don't know what. But it was gone. Vanished. The water beneath it had never rippled. Like it was never there. Back below, Caleb and Saito reached the comms room. Everything was off. Manual reboot failed. So Caleb opened the breaker panel. What the hell? The main circuit was melted. Saito leaned in. Like it was burned. No, Caleb whispered. Like it was digested. Suddenly, a sound behind them. Dripping. Wet. Slow. They turned. Nothing. Just the hallway. Dim, flickering lights. The dripping stopped. Then, a whisper. So faint, it almost wasn't there. Leave. Saito backed up. Did you hear that? Yeah. They moved fast, back to the deck. But Saito didn't make it. The others heard him scream. Just once. Then silence. They found his radio on the stairs. Still warm. But Saito was gone. The fog pressed closer. The ship creaked, groaned, as if shifting in place. Elise spoke quietly, barely above a whisper. We were never meant to come here. Tomas looked pale. We need to get off. Now. Caleb said nothing, just stared at the empty stairs. The radio in his hand crackled. Then a voice, barely human. You boarded us, one by one. And you'll leave the same way. He sat on the cold metal floor of the bridge, staring out through the cracked front glass into the wall of white fog. The rest of the Artemis was still invisible, as if it had sunk into another world. Below deck, they'd lost Saito just hours ago. He vanished in the blink of an eye. No sound but a single scream. No blood. No trace. Just gone. Elise sat across from him, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her eyes were glassy but alert. She hadn't spoken in an hour. The emergency beacon wasn't working. The ship's circuits had somehow melted without heat. And the longer they stayed, the more the air inside felt wrong, heavy and damp, like the breath of something massive, just waiting below. Tomas returned with a bundle of flashlights and ration packs from the lower storage. I locked the cabin doors, he said quietly, dropping the supplies on the floor. Just in case. In case of what? Elise whispered. Tomas didn't answer. He just glanced at the dark hallway behind them. That night, they took turns sleeping. Caleb took the second watch. At 3:12 a.m., he heard it again. The whisper. Not from the radio this time. From the walls. It was soft, like wind scraping across steel. But the words were clear. You shouldn't have come. Caleb gripped the flashlight and rose slowly. Every instinct told him not to follow it. He followed it. Down the stairwell, into the corridor. Footsteps echoing behind him. But when he turned, no one was there. The ship groaned deeply, like it was shifting, flexing. Almost breathing. He passed cabin C3, the room Saito had been assigned. The door was cracked open. Inside, the light flickered once. And then something moved. Not walked. Not stepped. Slid. Across the far wall. Something long. Caleb stepped back slowly and shut the door. He returned to the bridge, shaken. He didn't wake the others. Not yet. By morning, the fog remained. They tried the radios again. Still dead. Tomas suggested climbing to the crow's nest to try the backup antenna. Caleb went with him. Elise stayed behind. Up top, the fog was no thinner. In fact, it seemed to climb with them. The higher they got, the thicker it became, like it was alive, trying to follow. At the very top, the wind was completely still. Tomas unscrewed the panel and examined the antenna. This one looks untouched. If I can power it separately, maybe. Caleb froze. He saw something in the fog. A shape, far out on the sea. A figure, standing on the water. Still, facing the ship. Not floating, not swimming, just standing. No ripples, no waves. Then, it moved. Not toward them. Straight down, vanishing beneath the surface without a sound. Tomas didn't see it. Caleb didn't tell him. Back below, Elise had been reading the recovered logs again. The old ship's name had finally been found, the Arclight. It had been missing for 13 years. Declared lost after its distress beacon went silent in the North Atlantic. No wreckage was ever found. No survivors. No explanation. Yet it was here now, as if it had waited for them. She flipped to the last log entry again. Thompson swam last night. Said the sea was calling his name. Said he saw lights below the waves. We warned him not to go. He dove at 3:07 a.m. He never came back up. But this morning, we heard his voice inside the hull. That evening, Tomas went missing. No scream. No warning. Just silence. One moment he was with them in the bridge, then the flashlight blinked out. When it flicked back on, he was gone. His headset lay on the floor, still warm. Caleb ran below deck, calling his name. Only echoes answered. They searched until midnight. Nothing. Not even a footprint. Later, Elise found a wet footprint inside her cabin. Not hers. Not Caleb's. Still fresh, and leading toward the mirror. She called Caleb in. Together, they stared at it. Not a reflection. Not quite. The image in the mirror was the room, but not theirs. It was older, dirtier, covered in what looked like rot. And in the reflection, behind them, Tomas stood, but his eyes were empty. And he was smiling. Caleb spun around. The room was empty. When he looked back, the mirror was cracked. And Tomas was gone. They both agreed to sleep with the lights on. They kept knives nearby. The ship creaked around them, shifting like something alive. And from the floor beneath, late in the night, they heard footsteps, soaked and dragging, getting closer. The sound was unmistakable. Wet footsteps. Heavy. Uneven. Soaked as if someone was walking barefoot across a flooded deck. But the floor was dry. Caleb held his breath, clutching the rusted utility knife he'd taken from the bridge. Elise sat beside him, lips pressed tight, eyes fixed on the doorway. The footsteps stopped. Then, a whisper. Not from the hallway. From the ceiling vent above them. Open the door. Elise trembled. It's not him. It's not Tomas. No, Caleb said. It's something using his voice. They didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the fog had thickened again. Elise stepped outside for air. What little of it felt breathable anymore. Everything smelled like rust and salt water. She leaned over the railing and stared into the pale, endless sea. The water was perfectly still. Too still. Then she saw it. Just under the surface, shapes. Dozens of them. Humanoid. Pale. Suspended like bodies in a mass grave. Their faces were turned upward, toward her. Eyes wide open. Mouths agape. As if they were screaming silently beneath the waves. She stumbled back, gasping. By the time Caleb reached her side, the water was empty again. They agreed not to separate anymore. Every hour, they could feel the ship changing. Metal groaned in ways it shouldn't. Walls flexed slightly, almost like muscle under skin. Mold crept up corners faster than seemed natural, pulsing faintly as if it was alive. The Arclight was no longer just abandoned. It was transforming, feeding. In the galley, they discovered a new logbook. Not from the original crew, from someone else. Pages torn and smudged, but one passage stood out. It calls from the water. It doesn't speak like we do, but we hear it. Every night, we hear it louder. And when you listen too long, you answer. When the ship is full, it empties. When it's empty, it waits. That night, the ship began to whisper to Caleb directly. It knew his name. Caleb, come see. Just look. It's beautiful down here. He woke with his face pressed against the porthole, fingers smearing the glass, his lips mumbling something in a language Elise didn't recognize. She slapped him awake. He had no memory of moving, no memory of what he saw, but his hands were wet. Salt water dripped from his sleeves. Later that evening, a banging sound echoed through the ventilation shafts. Slow, rhythmic. Boom, 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 like a hand slamming on steel from inside the hull. Then they heard a scream, a child's scream, high-pitched, echoing from the cargo hold. There were no children on this ship, Elise whispered. Caleb nodded. It's luring us. They stayed away from the lower decks, but the banging grew louder. That's when Elise had the idea. The surveillance system, she said. The bridge had interior cams. If they still work, maybe we can see what's moving. They powered the monitors with a spare battery rig Caleb had rebuilt from fragments of the radar array. Static, black screens. Then one flickered on. Camera 8. Lower corridor. And something was walking across the screen. Pale, human-shaped, but wrong. Its limbs bent the wrong way. Its face was wearing Tomos skin, but the eyes beneath were glowing black. It stopped mid-step and looked directly into the camera, as if it knew. Then the feed cut to static. Elise began to cry. Caleb said nothing, because he'd seen something else. In the far corner of the screen was a mirror, and his own reflection had been standing there, watching him, smiling. They couldn't stay on the bridge. The walls had started sweating. Dark, sticky brine seeped from the corners, and the air smelled like rot. So they moved to the captain's quarters, bolting the door shut. There, they found a final surprise. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age. It had one word written on the front. Last. Inside was a short letter, typed, faded, dated 13 years ago. To whoever finds this, you are the last. The Arclight took the rest. It will take you too. The ocean below is no longer just water. It has eyes. It has memory. It called to us one by one until we couldn't say no. When we vanish, we do not die. We become something else. Something it wears. If you are reading this, get off the ship. Burn it if you can. If you can't, don't look in the water. Don't listen at night. And whatever you do, never answer when it whispers your name. Elise put the letter down. And then, a voice outside the door. Soft. Familiar. Elise, it's me. Tomos. I'm here. Caleb drew his knife. The doorknob turned slowly. Click. Click. The voice grew quieter. Sadder. You left me. I'm cold. The knob stopped. Silence. Then the hallway filled with the sound of slithering, like skin dragging over metal. Then it was gone. That night, Elise dreamed she was underwater. She could breathe. She floated above the sea floor where dozens of faces stared up at her. All of them had their mouths open. All of them were whispering at once. And the sea beneath them pulsed with life. A giant eye opened, staring up from the trench, right into her soul. She woke up screaming. Caleb was gone. Elise woke up alone. The blanket beside her was still warm, but Caleb was gone. Not a sound, not a scream, just absence. She called his name once, then twice. Nothing, only the familiar creak of the Arclight's hull groaning around her. But it was deeper now, slower, like the ship was breathing through its walls. Something had taken Caleb, Just like Saito, just like Tomas. And now, she was the last. She didn't cry. Terror had long since eaten her tears. She grabbed the knife Caleb had left behind, shoved the final letter into her jacket pocket, and left the captain's quarters. Outside, the hallway was flooded in ankle-deep water. Dark, cold. It hadn't rained. It hadn't come from the ocean. It had come from within the ship. With each step, the water rippled unnaturally, as if something underneath was watching her move. She moved quickly toward the bridge. It was the only place she hadn't fully searched. Maybe there was still one answer left. But the walls whispered as she walked. Not voices anymore, memories. I shouldn't have opened the hatch. The sea showed me everything, and I couldn't look away. She's listening. Right now. She's learning your name. The whispers weren't random. They were personal. The bridge had changed. It was no longer rusted and cold. It was glistening. Everything was coated in a slick, black mucus. The control panels were unrecognizable. The ceiling pulsed like a beating heart. Elise wanted to run, but something drew her in. At the back of the room, tucked into a corner beneath a dripping pipe, was a shattered piece of reflective glass. Half a mirror. She stepped in front of it. Her reflection didn't match her movements. It stood still, smiling. Then it spoke. "You're almost ready." The mirror shattered without warning, spraying her with tiny cuts. She stumbled back, and her foot hit something soft. She turned. Caleb. His body, curled up, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Except, it wasn't him. Not anymore. His skin was gray, bloated. His pupils were gone, replaced with tiny black holes that reflected the sea. His lips moved, but no sound came. Then, behind her, footsteps. She turned to run, but the bridge door had closed, and something on the other side was knocking. Once, twice, then it whispered, "Last." She ran, down the hall, through the mess, back into the lower decks. Water now reached her knees. The ship's insides were changing, flesh replacing metal, veins crawling along the ceilings like cables. She was inside something alive. She slipped near the engine room and fell into the water. When she opened her eyes, something floated past her, a piece of parchment. She grabbed it. More of the logbook. It read, "We thought it was a ship. It's not. It's a seed. It lands, it waits, and it feeds. The ocean kept it hidden for years. Then we woke it up. One by one, it consumes us. Not the bodies, the memories. It wears our faces. It speaks our words. It makes you trust it, love it, follow it. And when you're the last, it opens." Elise stood up slowly and saw it. At the end of the hallway, where the hull had cracked open, was a glowing rift, pulsing like a wound. It wasn't metal. Not anymore. It was flesh. And something was calling her. Not in words. In feeling. She stepped closer. Inside the rift was darkness. And in that darkness, the sea. But not the one above. The sea beneath. An ancient trench, deeper than anything recorded. And from the abyss, a shape was rising. Massive. Endless. With eyes. Too many eyes. She tried to run, but the ship shifted beneath her, forcing her toward the opening. The water rose rapidly, up to her chest, her neck, her mouth. She screamed as she slipped through the tear in the hull, plunging into darkness. Everything stopped. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer on the ship. She was beneath it, floating, weightless, surrounded by the others. Saito, Tomas, Caleb, and dozens more. They drifted silently around her, mouths moving, eyes empty. They whispered in unison. "She hears you now. She knows who you are. You are part of her story." Elise turned and saw it, a colossal shape buried in the ocean floor, like a goddess made of coral and shadow. The real ship, not built, but grown, waiting at the bottom of the sea for something to feed it. Memories. Voices. Souls. Elise screamed. and the water rushed into her lungs. She woke up, back on the deck. The fog was gone. The ocean was calm. She was alone. The arclight looked normal again, but she was different. Inside, she felt hollow, like something had been taken or left behind. She walked to the edge of the deck and looked down into the water. Her reflection stared back, but it smiled and whispered, "One more." Elise didn't speak for hours. She sat alone on the upper deck of the arclight, the sun breaking through the fog for the first time since they found the ship. The sea was calm, still, beautiful, even, but she couldn't feel it. Not anymore. She could still hear them. Caleb's voice, Tomas, even Saito, whispering beneath the waves like echoes stuck on loop. She knew she was the only one left now, but she wasn't alone. Not really. Something else was here. Inside the ship. Inside her. She moved like she was being guided. Not by thought. Not by fear. By memory. Except, they weren't all hers. Flashes of faces she'd never seen. Dreams that weren't hers. Screams that echoed through unfamiliar corridors. The ship had fed on her mind, merged with it. She walked the lower halls, now fully submerged in cold black water. Except the water wasn't just water anymore. It was alive. It pulsed softly beneath her skin, sliding into the cracks of her thoughts. In the observation room, where they'd found the first signs of abandonment, Elise saw something waiting on the central monitor. A playback file, labeled, "The Final Recording." She tapped the keyboard. It flickered once, then played. A man's face appeared, haggard, eyes wide, beard soaked with sweat. He sat in the captain's chair. Not Marlowe, not the Artemis's crew. The original captain of the Arclight. He stared straight into the lens. "If you're seeing this, I'm sorry. We thought we were the first, that this ship was ours to take. But it wasn't a discovery. It was a trap. The ship doesn't sail the ocean. The ocean sails it. It's a collector, a living memory vault. It takes crews, learns them, becomes them. Then it drifts, waiting for the next to come aboard." He looked down. His hands were trembling. "We tried to leave. We tried to destroy it. But once it knows your name, it keeps you. I've seen what lies beneath it. A mind. Vast. Ancient. Buried under the seabed like a parasite coiled in darkness. It reaches through the hull like veins in the brain, crawling into your head until you can't tell where you end and it begins." His voice cracked. "We are no longer a crew. We are the ship. And now, so are you." The video glitched, then cut to static. Elise sat in silence. That was what it had all been for. The hallucinations. The whispers. The voices of her friends. It wasn't haunting them. It was recording them. Preserving them. Like insects in amber. Perfect memories. Forever alive in its dark mind. She heard the creak again. The same slow groan of metal from deep in the hull. But now she recognized it. It wasn't just a sound. It was a heartbeat. Back in the corridor, the walls were fully transformed. No more steel. Just a long, endless hallway made of living tissue. It pulsed with a dull red glow. Elise followed it. Not because she wanted to, but because the ship had finished with her. Now it was ready to show her everything. At the end of the hall stood a door she hadn't seen before. Made of bone. Breathing. It opened on its own. Inside was a vast chamber, the ship's core. Dark water floated in midair, swirling like a storm trapped in a globe. Inside the water, suspended like a fetus in the womb, was a massive, coiled organism. Thousands of eyes, rows of teeth. It didn't move, but Elise felt it watching her. Not through vision, through thought. She fell to her knees as her brain filled with voices. "You are the final breath of your kind. The last memory I needed. Now, become mine." Her body began to freeze. Numbness spreading up her legs. Water poured from her mouth, from her eyes, from her skin. The ship was extracting her. Not her flesh, her mind. Everything she'd ever been. Every fear, every love, every scream, drawn upward into the storm. She felt herself leaving. And then, a voice. Not the ship's. Caleb. Elise, you have to fight it. She blinked. Her reflection, just beyond the glassy storm, stared back. It was him, or something of him, the last piece of his soul, still echoing inside the ship. You still have your name, he said. It can't take that unless you give it. Don't let it finish. She gritted her teeth. The storm screamed in her ears. Blood ran from her nose, but she reached into her coat pocket. The letter, the one marked last. She unfolded it with trembling hands and whispered the words again. If you are reading this, burn it. Her lips trembled. She pulled a flare from her belt. She struck it. The room burst into red light. The storm screamed. The tissue walls recoiled. The womb of the ship began to shake. She tossed the flare into the core. The fluid caught. Fire underwater. The storm exploded outward. The coiled organism shuddered, spasmed, shrieked with a sound like metal tearing through bone. The ship began to collapse inward. Elise ran. Water poured from the ceiling. Flames licked the walls. Voices screamed from every direction. Thousands of them. Begging, crying, laughing, threatening. Some were hers. Most weren't. She reached the deck. The fog was gone. The sky was wide and open. And there, 100 feet away, was a rescue vessel. Its lights blinding in the sunlight. She dove off the side of the ship without thinking. She hit the water and never looked back. They pulled her aboard. She was half-conscious, rambling about voices, about flesh and ghosts and machines. The rescue team told her the Artemis had sent a partial distress call 2 days ago, then vanished from radar. They'd found her floating near debris, but no ship, no arc light, no trace. Elise never told them the full story. She couldn't. Not because they wouldn't believe her, but because part of her still wasn't sure she had escaped. Years later, in a coastal museum, a new exhibit opened. A salvaged ship's logbook, water-damaged but intact. The curator flipped through the pages, then paused. On the last page, someone had written, "They left the ship, one by one, but none ever came back." And below that, a signature, Elise Radner. But she had never written it.